It's not just that when you look into the heavens can you see evidence for God. When you look through a microscope at a simple, so-called simple form of life, you can see evidence for design as well. Do you see this? This is a one-celled amoeba. The Darwinists say we all evolved from something like this. You heard of the theory of macroevolution? From the goo to you via the zoo? This is the goo. Or from the infantile to the reptile to the crocodile to the gentile? This is the infantile. Well, in Darwin's day, this was not considered to be any big deal, that maybe non-living chemicals could come together and somehow, through natural forces, create a living thing, and then natural selection could take over, and that could explain how all these living things got here, all these new life forms. If Darwin knew what he knew today, or what we know today about a cell, I doubt he would have his theory that he has now. Because that he had 150 years ago, when we look at a cell now, we see, first of all, it's a factory. But secondly, there's something that has the unmistakable signs of intelligence in it. And in order to show you these unmistakable signs of intelligence, I have to take you to your breakfast table. How many people in here like alphabet cereal? Anyone? All right, let's suppose you want to have a bowl of alphabet cereal. You come downstairs one morning to have a bowl, and you see the boxes knocked over on the table, and right in the middle of the table, the letters spell, "Take out the garbage, Mom." What are you going to assume? The cat knocked the box over? Earthquake shook the house? No, you're going to say that that's intelligent design from an intelligent being, Mom. Or let's suppose you're walking along the beach and you see in the sand, "John loves Mary." What do you assume? The crabs came out of the water and made that message? The waves did that? No, you're going to say that has to be the product of intelligence. Why? Because in all your prior experience, you know that messages only come from minds. The repetitive natural forces of nature, and there's only 4 known natural forces of nature. What are they? Does anyone know? Gravity's one of them. Electromagnetism, and the strong and weak nuclear forces. Those are the only 4 known forces of nature. And when we talk about the laws of nature, what we're saying is these 4 forces do certain things repetitively. We call them laws. But those 4 forces of nature can't explain a message like this. No more than the laws of ink and paper can explain why the letters in the Bible are in this order. You need intelligence to explain why the letters are in the order they are. You say, okay, fine, what does this have to do with life? Because if a message always requires a mind, where does this message come from? DNA. The 4-letter genetic alphabet that every living thing has. You have DNA, I have DNA, a banana has DNA. And inside of you, by the way, your genome is 3.5 billion letters long. All the letters are in the right order, save a rare error or two. And they have to be in that right order, or you wouldn't be here. And there's no known chemical, physical, biological force that can explain why the letters are in the order they're in up the spine of the DNA molecule. Oh, we know that A always goes with T and C always goes with G. But the order in which they go this way, there is no known physical, biological, or chemical reason or force that can tell us why they're in that order. This is literally a program. I don't know, from where I come from, whenever there's a program, there must be a programmer. Now, you say, well, Frank, maybe it started really simply in an amoeba. Well, first of all, even if there was a simple code in amoeba and it evolved, codes don't evolve. I mean, what do you think would happen if you took the Microsoft PowerPoint code that I'm showing you this presentation on and just mutated it randomly? How long do you think this program would stay working? Not very long. But let's take a look at how much information is in an amoeba. A one-celled amoeba, supposedly a simple form of life. And by the way, how big is an amoeba? You could line up several hundred amoebas in an inch. And in each one of them, you've got the equivalent of 1,000 volumes of an encyclopedia in a microscopic amoeba. Now, to believe that that resulted by natural forces is like believing that the Library of Congress resulted from an explosion in a printing shop. I don't have enough faith to believe that. The first life seems to require an intelligent cause. You say, well, Frank, who told you this? Some Christian? No, you know who told me this? The most famous atheist in the world, Richard Dawkins. He admits there's that much information in a simple amoeba. Well, if there's that much information, that much of a message, it would seem there must be a messenger, which is, by the way, maybe why Dawkins, how many have seen the movie Expelled? Have you seen the movie Expelled with Ben Stein? I just saw Ben Stein in Charlotte about a month ago. He came to Charlotte. He started off his talk this way. Those of you who don't know who I'm talking about when I say Ben Stein, you'll know it when I say it. He started off his talk, he comes up to the podium, he goes, let's get this started right. Bueller. He was the teacher in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, right? But he's an economist. You see him on TV a lot. Anyway, he was the narrator in this movie called Expelled, a documentary, which talks about how people who suggest that maybe intelligence is behind life and behind the universe are being expelled from the academy. They're being fired. They're being denied tenure. They're getting all sorts of trouble. And at the end of the movie, he interviews Richard Dawkins. And he says, Dr. Dawkins, how did life begin? And Dawkins says, well, I have no idea. And Stein persisted and said, what do you think your best suggestion is? And he said, I suppose you could say that life was brought here by aliens. At that point, Ben Stein stopped and he said, I don't believe it. Dr. Dawkins believes in intelligent design. Why? Because an alien's an intelligent designer. You notice that? He's an intelligent designer. Now, why would Dawkins be open to an alien bringing life here, but not God? I think I know why. He hasn't said this, but I think I know why. Because God brings morality with him, an alien doesn't. Of course, this just puts the question off one more step. Who created the alien? If natural forces can't create life here on Earth, why should we expect natural forces to create life somewhere else and then bring it here? Why is this not like who made God? Because God is not inside the universe. God is outside the universe, and he's timeless. If you're timeless, do you have a beginning? No, he is the uncaused first cause. He's the unmoved mover. But an alien is created in the universe. So who created the alien? He's not helping himself here. He's simply admitting that the evidence seems to be so tilted toward intelligence that he has to come up with an alien as a possibility. Last thing before we take a break. Do you see this? We were all at one point there. That's 11 weeks in the womb. Question, is that animal, mineral, vegetable, or human? That's human. In fact, let's go all the way back to when your mother and your father got together. Have you guys had this talk before? I see some young people in here, so I'll try and be discreet. When your mother and your father got together to make you, your father sent the entire population of the United States, 300 million soldiers, toward your mother's egg. And then there was a race, and you won. Don't let anyone ever tell you you're not special. You beat out 300 million others. You have blown away anything Michael Phelps has done. Now, seeing some of you limp in here earlier makes it hard for me to believe you were the fastest soldier in the gene pool. But you were. And your soldier was 20 to 30 times smaller than a grain of salt, yet it contained half of the genetic information that makes you you. And your mother's egg was about the size of a period at the end of a sentence in an average book, and it contained the other half of the genetic information that makes you you. And when your soldier and your egg came together, a new 100% genetic human being was created. Do you know you have not received any more genetic information from that point till right now? In fact, there were only 4 things separating you from adulthood: time, air, water, and food. Those are the same 4 things that separate a 2-year-old from adulthood. Does this have implications on the abortion issue? Yeah, I think it does. We don't kill the 2-year-old. Why do we kill the unborn child in the womb? Genetically, it's the same. You say, Frank, you can't legislate morality. No extra charge for this. This isn't part of the presentation. But this was the subject of our first book. The only thing you can legislate is morality. All laws legislate morality. The only question is whose morality? And we ought not legislate my morality. We ought not legislate your morality. We ought to legislate the morality, the one Jefferson said was self-evident. Why did he put the right to life first in the Declaration of Independence? Because the right to life is the right to all other rights. If you don't have life, you don't have anything. Now, no extra charge for that. From that point till right now, an astonishing construction project began taking place. From the moment of your conception, cells began multiplying at a rate of 4,000 cells per second. So just after your contraception, 4,000 cells per second. Brain cells began multiplying at a rate of 100,000 cells per second, for most of you anyway. Some cells became heart cells, others became lung cells, others became brain cells. How do they know how to do this? Nobody knows. Some cells went so far across you to become what they needed to become that it would be equivalent to you today walking across the United States alone. And that construction project continues to this day. You just made 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. You just made another 4 million new red blood cells. Knock it off. How do you know how to do this? Are you thinking about this? Are you going, I gotta make new blood cells. Wait, gotta get more. No, why? Why can't you do this? This is an argument that we don't use very often for God, but I'm going to take just 5 minutes here to talk about it. It's what Aristotle called final causality, and it was picked up by Thomas Aquinas, a medieval theologian in the 1200s. And basically, final causality points out that the entire created order is goal-directed. It's going in a direction. Whether it's about living things or non-living things, the entire reality is goal-directed. We see this in our biology. Why is an embryo goal-directed to become an adult? If it gets proper food and nutrition and isn't killed, it's going to become an adult. Why does an acorn always become an oak tree? Why doesn't it on occasion become a seahorse? Or a Tesla? Or a pepperoni pizza? Because it's goal-directed to become an oak tree. Why do the planets circle the sun? You say because of gravity, Frank. Yes, but why is gravity consistently doing what it's doing? Because it's goal-directed. Why can we take a rover, build it here on Earth, launch it, and put it on a planet, Mars, 60 million miles away with absolute precision? Because we can depend on the forces of nature being consistent and precise. Why? Because they're goal-directed. All of these things are goal-directed, and in order to be goal-directed, there has to be an external intellect directing them. You ever think about that? Somebody is holding this universe together right now, directing it toward an end. Whether they're living things or non-living things, there's a mind directing reality toward an end. In fact, there are biologists that manipulate fruit fly embryos to see what will happen to them. And whenever they try and manipulate a fruit fly embryo to try and get it to go in a different direction, the embryo makes heroic efforts to get back on track to become a fruit fly. And scientists routinely do this, and they always get one of 3 outcomes. They either get a normal fruit fly, a mutant fruit fly, or a dead fruit fly. They don't even get a horse fly, much less a horse. Why? Because the fruit fly embryo is directed to become a fruit fly. There's an external intellect directing. And yet we have this theory in so-called science now that says that these creatures and species can just blur the lines between one another over long periods of time, when we try with all of our intelligence to blur these lines, to go from one species to another or one type to another, and we can't with all our intelligence, yet we're led to believe that non-intelligent processes can do it. And you know what? Even if macroevolution were 100% true, there has to be an external intellect holding the natural forces of nature together that allows macroevolution to occur. So even if macroevolution is true, you don't get rid of the need for an external intellect, i.e. God. Outside of that, I don't feel strongly on this issue at all. Now, I have a book coming out in January. It's called Stealing from God, Why Atheists Need God to Make Their Case. I go into a lot of detail on that argument. But just about every argument I've talked about here is in the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. So if you want to go deeper on it, you can. When we come back from the break, we're going to drill down on the moral argument.